Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode. I hope you've all had an amazing week. This past week for me has been pretty busy. Lots of travel this past week. And when you've just had like multiple weeks where every weekend you're, busy on a plane, going somewhere, and you're just like, I just like 1 week home, please. So I can tell you now, I'm not going anywhere this week. I know I had some obligations that I needed to do, but I am kind of thinking about this from the perspective of my physical and mental health. And I feel like if I continue to go and keep matching my speed and the intensity that I have been going at for the last couple of weeks, I'm going to quickly run myself into the ground and maybe even get unwell. So I've kind of backed off on all, non-essential urgent obligations so that this weekend I can just take it a little bit easier. So big week, as I mentioned. I know so much of the earlier part of this last week was doing some recipe development. So you guys may or may not be aware, I have several different recipe guides, and each year I try to produce another one. So this one is probably going to be the biggest recipe book yet, or at least the recipe list that I have looks like it's probably going to match, if not be the biggest one so far. So it's been really fun to kind of come up with new foods. And again, I think my tastes have changed over the years, as I'm sure you guys have noticed that for yourselves as well. And what you might previously have loved and were obsessed with, you're like, yeah, I could take it or leave it. And you're, moving into like new eras. So I'm really pumped about this book because there are so many new flavors and different styles of foods. And I've also tried to incorporate some of these, we'll call them, and I hate this word, but like viral recipes that I've put a little spin on my own and kind of changed some ingredients around to give them the Holly kick. So I guess for the better part of my flight to Memphis this past week, where I was actually driving once we got to Memphis, we drove an hour to Oxford, Mississippi, which is where I guess the University of Mississippi is, for anyone that doesn't know. But we had a conference called Trainology. They do this every year where a lot of the students will kind of present their current work, and it was super, super fun. But before I jump into that, again, my flight had no Wi-Fi. I'm just like, can I just get a break? Like every time I have caught a flight, something's gone wrong, or I can't access the internet, which is so critical for me to be able to do work, because I don't really have during my weekdays, if I take off a 3 or 4 hour chunk and just assign it to travel, I then have to make up that work that I would normally do somewhere else. It's got to get done. It's not like these are just things that cannot be done. So yeah, it was so frustrating. But when I got on the plane, they're like, I'm so sorry, the Wi-Fi will not be working today. I'm like, God damn it, what can I do that doesn't necessarily require me to be on the internet? So I actually got through probably 40 recipes on my flight. So going through, putting down the ingredients that I want to use and some estimations on quantity. So now that I kind of have all of that, I then kind of proceeded to, while I was in the airport waiting, get some inspo for our pictures, so that when we're doing the photo shoots for all of these foods, we know the good angles, because it's really difficult, I think, to kind of start scratch without having some kind of inspo. And my background, I'm not a chef, and I'm also not a food photographer, so everything falls back on me. So it's nice to have something to kind of help guide all of your image creation, and I've been very impressed with the last few that we've done. This last week, I was finishing up the touches on a pistachio blondie and a Nutella brownie, which I believe has already been posted by the time you're seeing this, so you can go and check out that recipe. Super delicious. This one is not necessarily a low-calorie option, but I do explain in the captions how to make it lower in calories if you're somebody that needs a little bit more of a macro-friendly touch. But anyhow, that's super exciting. I always love a new recipe book, and I'm sure all the people that follow along, it's one of the main things that I think people get stuck with. I know in most of the coaching check-ins that I have, people who struggle to be consistent with their nutrition, often, with certain questions being asked, sometimes the responses are, oh, I'm just not enjoying what I'm eating. Yeah, I know these are my targets, but I don't really like cooking, or I don't really enjoy this type of food. And it's because they've been kind of conditioned to, oh, you should just eat this way. So, when you kind of take off the labels of foods and, recognize that everything has a caloric value, all foods also have a micronutrient value as well. So there are some that are very high micronutrient composition, others that are not, but we don't have to ignore those or not include them at times. So it's kind of finding a good balance of, all of these food combos that you really look forward to, because it allows you to be consistent and adherent with, calories that are appropriate for your goals. And that could be, performance-based goals, it could be aesthetic-based goals, and just health goals in general. So pumped about that one, and there'll be more to come on that. But I want to move over to, the travel and the trip to Mississippi. So there were some really interesting presentations, and I'm not sure whether I'll be able to get the actual studies for you because some of them were not currently accepted. So they might have been submitted for review and they're still pending. So in those instances, you're not really meant to talk about findings or really even share preprints. I know that's kind of the popular thing to do now, particularly for some of these influencers that are coming through. But I think, in the science and the academic world, at least the people that I've spoken to, it's kind of frowned upon because, you can submit your paper and your research, and it may come back with many alterations and revisions. So, the way that it's been presented initially, by the time it's finally accepted, it could be a very different paper with a lot of modifications, and it might tell a very different story. So I'm not sure I'm going to be able to give you the recent studies, but I can at least talk about what they shared on. And I guess the topic for a lot of these papers, and it's because they come from Dr. Jeremy Lenecky's lab in Mississippi or Ole Miss, and they study blood flow restriction, but they're also very interested in something called cross-education. So cross-education is a phenomenon. It's also called cross-transfer. Some of you may have heard of this, but it's when we apply resistance training to one limb, it can potentially result in strength adaptations or strength gains, or muscle growth in the contralateral limb. So super cool. And to make it even more interesting, a couple of these groups were looking at whether there are differences in strength adaptations and or hypertrophy adaptations if we look at the dominant arm to perform the exercise versus the non-dominant arm. And is there any kind of cross effect there? So it was really interesting. Very complicated. I know we had back-to-back 6 or 7 presentations. So I know by presentation 3, when your brain just starts to get a little bit mushy and I'm like, yo, can we talk about something different for a second? And then, I'll be able to focus again. There was a lot of cool information and complicated information. But anyhow, this theory or this phenomenon is primarily thought to be driven by neurological adaptations. In fact, there are studies that use EMG where they found that there are increased neural activity in the untrained limb, which actually indicates there's quite a role to play with the central nervous system. So I think that's so interesting. It's an area that I am not very well versed in at all. So it's something that I'd like to, because I think the practical application of this type of training intervention would be that if you get an injury or you're going through some kind of rehabilitation or you've had a major surgery, it's often one side of the body. So a lot of people really struggle then with knowing, well, does that mean I'm going to lose all my strength, or does that mean I'm going to lose all of my gains? And often some of these surgeries are, pretty comprehensive and very major, and the recovery time can be, as little as 4 weeks and to many months. So I think there's a lot of utility in these study designs, and I'm really eager to see kind of where this goes, because I know so many people really, they get so worried about that, or they just miss training. So if we can find a way, number one, to kind of work around that injury, but then also potentially maintain some of those strength adaptations from prior to the injury or prior to the surgery, and maintain some of that hypertrophy just by training the contralateral limb, it'd be super cool, right? So watch this space. I will be reaching out to some of the presenters from the weekend and find out whether there is anything that they can share that's kind of allowed in terms of their data. But I had a really good time. It was really, really fun. And the topic of Ole Miss, oh my God. So their gym, their rec center, I guess it was only built in the last couple of years. It was incredible. It was huge. I'm like, wow, it really makes my high school, college gym kind of look pretty crappy. But I think it's still new for them. Their old gym was certainly not as impressive. But my gosh, they had so many different pieces of equipment. So it was really great on Saturday after all the presentations were done. I kind of had an open day. So Sam and I actually went over to the college. It was actually fun for him because he's an alumni of Ole Miss. So it was kind of going back to his old stomping grounds, and he was showing me around, the school and where he did his PhD. It was really cool. So I had a good time, but I think we had an even better time at playing with all of this equipment. So it's the first time in a long time that I've actually been able to go into the gym and not have to race home because I've got meetings or I've got to start coaching or I've got a film day scheduled even on the weekend to get things done. So we ended up taking, I think here you can see on my data, I'm going to blow this up so that you can see it. Here we go. Let me come across the page. Okay, here. All right, so you can see this Saturday, I've highlighted the line, glutes and shoulders. I was there for 2 hours, which is so unusual for me. I normally do not have the luxury of training for that long. And interestingly, we didn't really do that many more exercises than I would normally. But, we kind of got to take our time and, we are both really interested in, I guess, the mechanics of each machine. So why is this machine better than that one? You're talking about angles and loading, and it was just a good opportunity to kind of take it all in. So that was a 2-hour workout. You can see here, I burned about 600 or so calories, which is, again, pretty unusual for me. After the presentations on Friday, we were, I guess, invited back to Dr. Lenike's home for, I guess, a little bit of a celebration. They make a competition out of it. So obviously they announce awards. So someone walks away with some cash prizes and then everyone goes home and has a little bit of fun. But you can see here, there are a couple of days. I suppose we can start having a look at my data. There appear to be some calories that are somewhere around the realm of 1,200 or 1,000. And I don't think that that's entirely true. I know earlier in the week, some of these days were just estimates. So you can see here, there's a day on Wednesday where it says that my calories, what I at least tracked, were only 566. I'm sorry, I keep scratching my nose. My cat loves to sit on me while I'm trying to coach, and he just is such a fluff ball. And then when he leaves, I feel like he just leaves hair in places that I don't want it, up my nose. It's just scratching me right now. Sorry. I'll try and get rid of this hair. Anyway, so 566 calories is pretty low, but I was doing so much brownie tasting and testing on those days. And then, once I finished shooting, I'm like, yeah, why not? I'll have another slice. So I'm pretty confident on this Wednesday here. My caloric intake was probably much closer to 2,000 than it is to 500, that's for sure. So again, some of these days are just estimates, and we'll take a look at what that does to my compliance if I take out those numbers versus put in maybe a more accurate representation of what they are. But Friday, this is actually pretty accurate. So we got up in the morning, I got a little bit of a walk in, and I also had some work that I needed to get done. I needed to squeeze in a training session before the conference started at noon. So by the time I actually got over to the gym, I only had 50 minutes to get a workout in. So you can see it was pretty short and also very low calories, at least for what I'm used to expending in my sessions. And then I also didn't get an opportunity to eat because by the time I arrived on Thursday evening, so I flew in, we went straight to a dinner. I didn't have an opportunity to go to the grocery store because it was quite late, and I guess my friends had organized a reservation for dinner somewhere. And then when we got home, it was 11:30, 12 o'clock. So I woke up, also had no food, and also a bunch of stuff I needed to get done. So I think I just sat there, picked at some leftover Reese's M&Ms from my flight. Yeah, I guess then I went and trained just a belly of coffee. That was probably about it. So then I was at the presentations all day, and because we're at the college or the university, there were no, restaurants or anything in the nearby, or at least walking distance to get any food. So I was there for maybe like 5 hours without any food and was so hungry by the time I finished. So like all of the calories here that you see, bar maybe like 10 grams of Reese's M&Ms, were consumed in the evening at the event. So, oh no, that's not true. We went and had, I can't remember the name of the restaurant, but we ordered these, and I'll put the video up on the screen. Sam had, I guess, a Cuban or a Reuben. I always get these two confused. I should really learn. It's one with some kind of like Thousand Island dressing and sauerkraut, which to me, you put those things together, I'm like, oh, that's such a weird combination of food, but so tasty. And then I had a chicken, something with chicken. It was like on a brioche roll with like a Kewpie style mayo. Holy moly, it was so freaking good. I was like ready to order another one to take with me to the event that we were going to afterwards because it was so good. But I obviously didn't. And then I think I just had some wine at the event and then went to bed. So it was a pretty low calorie day. But I mean, at the party, we were chatting the whole time. We were playing some fun games. And I honestly wasn't really thinking about what I wanted to eat. It was just enjoying the company and having some really good conversation. Saturday rolls around. This is obviously the day where we have a little bit more free time. So did obviously the workout. Afterwards, we drove to the downtown Oxford area, which is such an unusual little town. I wish that I took some video, but it's kind of very colonial, and all of the like boutiques are like a very unique style. Kind of funny, actually. I was like, oh God, like is this really the fashion here? It was very like preppy. I hate using that word, but I mean, that's the only way I can describe this style of fashion. And like, I don't know, cotton dresses, like all the girls in the town looked exactly the same. I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't fit in here. So it was fun to go and look around at all the boutiques, and then we grabbed some lunch. Sam's brother, Zach, actually took us to like a local bar, and they have all of the margarita, I guess, drinks in those machines churning away. Like the whole bar is set up with all of these different flavors. So we got one of those after our lunch, which was super necessary. It was so hot outside. It was like dry heat, and just walking from one venue to another, we were like, oh my gosh, I need a drink. So it was really fun to kind of look at all of what's available in the Oxford town area. And then when we got home, I don't think I did anything. I just sat on my phone, on the couch. And I think that's actually around the time that we heard the news about former President Trump being shot at one of the rallies. So I think all of us were just in shock and just sat there kind of watching some of the more like the non-mainstream news, and we were looking at our like independent news channels that we follow. For anybody that is looking for an independent news company to watch, we follow Timcast, and I have learned a lot just since, because obviously I'm from Australia, I wasn't really well informed about, I guess, the political scene here. So not wanting to go in biased, I found someone independent, and it's been very informative. But yeah, I think we were all just shocked and could not believe what was happening. So yeah, that was a really emotional afternoon, I think, for a lot of people. Okay, so I look a little different right now. It's because I proceeded to record my entire video. I had to pause it for a moment. Someone was knocking at my door. I realized that I'd spent the last 20 minutes finishing off all of my data and reviewing the questions from YouTube, and I didn't press start. So I didn't record any of it. I'm like, no! Oh my God, don't you hate technology? Love, hate. So anyway, I believe I had just wrapped up telling you a little bit about, I guess, the Saturday antics and all the fun training that we got up to. And then we were about to head out for dinner. So we've just heard about all of the news going on with Donald Trump, and we had dinner plans, and then we were heading out to meet friends. So when I go out for dinner, I guess, at least right now, I'm not necessarily focused on hitting specific macros. I do when I'm cutting and when I'm not, hopping on stage. I don't want to do that anymore. I was able to maintain a really healthy body composition. It's not my leanest, not my strongest, that's for sure, but I can certainly maintain a really healthy diet and feel really good. So the numbers that you're looking at here are me just kind of doing a bit of memory recall from the weekend, and I'm pretty accurate at it, but I wasn't doing it like in the moment. So usually I will start by looking for what protein source I'd like to eat. We went to a place, I think it was called City Grocery or something with the word grocery. Anyway, delicious. It was kind of a fine dining place, and they have meat, seafood, and kind of like a typical Holly style restaurant. And they had a delicious like tuna dish. So it was grilled tuna, and it was on a bed of like a avocado puree, which was super tasty. And then broad beans, which I haven't had in a long time now. Yes, that's a FODMAP. I was like, this is a dicey one for me to opt for, but I also wanted to eat something wholesome. You know, I'd earlier in the day been out and had like some kind of hot dog and, you know, margarita. So I was like, okay, let's get some fiber up in here. So I chose that, and we also had some bread and some wine, and then we went to another bar and had some cocktails. It was just a really good night. Again, I'm kind of eating to the point where I feel comfortable. I'm not really trying to put a ceiling on things, and what a great opportunity right now for me to kind of get back in the habit of using my, you know, skills that I inherently possess to self-regulate, to auto-regulate. So, you know, for so many years after my competitions, I would try and beholden myself to having to track macros. And it was just keeping me, you know, from really accomplishing like a healthy, balanced relationship with food, and just being able to trust that, you know, I don't need that forever. It's a wonderful tool. And I'm so glad that for 10 years plus of my life, I have tracked macros, and I know so much about food, and I'm better off for it. But, you know, now it's kind of appropriate for me to step back from that and start to let my appetite regulation and those hunger cues guide my decisions. And I didn't eat, you know, past fullness on that evening. I kind of just enjoyed myself, and I even kind of turned down the last round of drinks that everyone was having, because I was like, yeah, I don't want to feel crappy in the morning. I know we've got, you know, a long drive ahead of us. So on that note, let me just tell you. So yes, I flew there, and you might be wondering why on earth I am driving back. So on Thursday, I ended up having a 6-hour delay. So I get myself ready to the airport, almost missed that flight because my ticket had been booked with the wrong date of birth. So I had to go back to the counter, and the counter was crazy busy, and update those details. So by the time I got back to security, I like had just a few minutes before like the plane was boarding. So that was so stressful. Finally, it got through. However, then proceeded to be a 6-hour delay. So I'd recently been reading up on some of the new laws granted by the Department of Transport, so the DOT. And they are now saying that if you are caused a delay by more than 3 hours, that's considered significant, the airlines now have to refund you the full flight. So that kind of time rolled around, and I'm like, all these people are just accepting like $10 vouchers for the trouble. I'm like, I'm going to go and get my discount or my refund, because this is ridiculous. Like, you know, it's lucky that I didn't have something urgent to be at that afternoon. But anyway, so I go to the lady, and I just said, look, you know, it's been 6 hours. I'd like to request a refund if that's okay. And as I'm doing that, I also know like it means I'm not going to get to this conference. I've just wasted half a day in the airport. I'm trying to difficultly do my check-ins with all of the people in the background doing like announcements. Like, you know, when like you're trying to talk on the phone and it's like someone's getting their name called or their security calls. Oh my God, it was really tough, but got it done. Yeah, I guess I was issued a refund and didn't think any more of it. So eventually I sat there for like another 30 minutes, and they finally announced, oh, your plane's ready. The air conditioning, something was broken, so you can board. So I ended up getting on the plane. So on Saturday night, I was like, I better just double check. I haven't been sent any of the notifications where you check in. So I called the airline, and they were like, yeah, it looks like your flight was actually like you canceled your whole flight. And I was like, what? I just canceled the original flight because I was going to find another airline to catch a plane so that I didn't, you know, made it to my destination, since you guys couldn't get me there on time. And they were like, oh, no, it looks like whoever canceled or gave you a refund canceled the second flight too. I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me. So I go to look at the flights to get home, and like the most affordable flight from Memphis to Fort Lauderdale was like close to $1,000 one way. And I'm like, why is airline travel so crazy expensive at the moment? Thankfully, Sam had driven. Sorry, he was driving back because he takes, I guess, our dog everywhere. She is just a blessing. And why would we not want to bring her? So he drives most places. So he was like, come back to Tampa and then we'll sort it out from there. So I still had to get from Tampa to Fort Lauderdale. And after 11 hours of driving on Sunday. I think we got back close to midnight, and I had to book a flight for Monday morning back to Fort Lauderdale. So that was just what you need. But anyway, I on the drive home, we did have some really fun foods. I know we stopped at Buc-ee's. You guys might have heard me talk about this place previously. It's like the biggest gas station where everybody basically stops to get food and stock up for their big trips, and it's kind of cool. So we ordered 3 different types of products this time, like all different to what we'd tried before. We had a brisket handheld. It was like, some kind of a bun. And then we ordered a 3-meat handheld sandwich, and we also ordered a steak and cheese burrito. They were all so good, but my favorite by far was definitely the steak and cheese burrito. So we split that down the middle. So I technically had a burger and half of a burrito. So a lot of calories consumed, but by the time we took off, we'd been out for a walk in the morning, and we still hadn't had an opportunity to get any food. So I was like, all right, this is breakfast. It's now just afternoon. So I had quite a few calories there. And then I think on the drive home, I did have a little Noosa yogurt that we had in our cooler, and then I ordered, so that by the time we got home, which was right around midnight, we had some sushi and insomnia cookies delivered to the house. So we had a bit of sushi. I was so full after that. Had a little nibble of a couple of different flavors of these cookies, and then put myself to bed because I had to get up early to catch another flight. So lots of calories consumed there, and you can see my fats was up around 99 grams, which is much higher for me. And again, that's just a result of choosing a non-lean protein sources. So lots of fat from those meats, the crumble cookies I had in my car on the drive, and then we had some insomnia cookies afterwards. Just that combination ended up giving me quite a bit of fat on that day, and quite, I imagine, a lot of saturated fats too. So for those of you that are wondering or concerned about that, the recommendations for saturated fat are to consume no more than 7% of your total daily intake, like energy intake, from saturated sources. So I know I do this math all the time for clients. For most women, that number ends up landing you around somewhere between 11 and maybe 18 grams of saturated fats per day. So now that you know that, take a look at your total calories consumption, and then work out what 7% of the calories are, and then divide it by 9 for how many grams of saturated fat you're consuming. And hopefully that leaves you in a good place for your dietary fats. So overall, it looks like my compliance to calories was actually low, but I am very confident in saying that they're probably much higher. So if I go over to my client tracking sheet here, and I put in some better estimates for those days. So I have to assume that on Wednesday, that was a day when I was cooking, I'm probably up around 250 grams of carbohydrate and probably 60 grams of fat, I have no doubt. And then my protein's probably a little bit higher than that too, just by way of trace amounts in those brownies. And then Friday, that was probably close to accurate. Thursday is a day where I think I might have had a little bit more just through some additional sources at the airport. So we'll put that in. It still looks like I underate my calories. I'm having a really hard time believing that. I feel like me just doing recall, because some of the macro tracking that I've got here on these days is me this morning just kind of loosely thinking back to what I ate and having a look at some pictures. I didn't actually eat those or track those macros while I was there. I guess coming over to have a look at my dietary fiber for this week. So it is a little bit low. It's not my best week. I hope that this week, again, now that I'm not going to be traveling, I can pay a little bit more attention to some healthier, more wholesome foods. And I know I'll feel a bit better too when I start to eat that way. I definitely feel very puffy, and my muscle and skin kind of feels very firm to the touch. For anyone that's ever done a peak week when you're eating a lot of carbohydrate, you're intentionally trying to fill out your muscle, and it feels very firm and tight to the touch. That's kind of how I'm feeling at the moment. And without having done any resistance training this week yet, and it is Wednesday, I may get an opportunity to train today. It just depends how long my patient check-ins go for. But I have gone multiple days without, a good lifting session, and that always makes me feel a little bit better. And I have not really done a whole lot of steps for what I'm used to. So here you can see the last 3 days. I've got one big walking day in, about 5,000 on that travel day, 8,000 yesterday, and a little bit of a spin as well. So I'm assuming that by the time I actually get some movement in, that I will feel a little bit less gross, because it is a nice feeling to me. And again, my decisions moving forwards around how I choose to eat are going to be based largely on how I'm feeling. So am I sleeping well? How was my mood? How's my performance in the gym? Those are the types of metrics that I'm more concerned about than necessarily what the scale number says. And you can also see here, I didn't weigh myself beyond, I think, Tuesday. So if we come over and have a look at my last weigh-in, I was 137. So I'm up from 133, which is about my show day weight. I suspect that if I was to weigh in today, particularly after having some really high carb days, I'm probably closer to 140. But I know that that will start to trickle down as my food choices kind of course correct, which I'll be intentional about this week, just because I haven't done a very good job at hitting my protein goals. Last week was just very spastic. I was doing a lot of cooking, a lot of sweets, and I chose to kind of stay closer to my, caloric goal and choose not to hit my protein. So instead of going over and exceeding my calories by a crazy amount, I just kind of traded out my macros there for more carbs. But I wouldn't normally do that. It's just because I was experimenting with a little bit more cooking that past week. So I won't be doing as much of that this week, to my knowledge, although I know I've got a lot of recipes that I need to kind of create, but they'll probably be from like our lunch and dinners in the new recipe book. So this weekend I'll probably get an opportunity to do some of those. Yeah, I haven't weighed myself, but I will do that probably over the next 2 days once I've had a little bit of training, or if I remember. But looking over at my data here for training, the 3 sessions that I did came in at 1,293 calories estimated. I haven't been tracking my training volume, and the reason for that is because right now I'm giving myself flexibility to not be so regimented and structured. I don't have a specific goal, that's really like the top priority. Right now, I'd be happy if I can kind of maintain the muscle mass that I have. And then when things kind of quieten down a little bit, I might, push my focus a little bit more back to training and get back onto a more structured program. I will keep the Miss Bikini Olympia program series going. I've got another one ready to go, and maybe that's when I will get back onto that platform. 237 minutes of resistance training this past week. Like I'd said earlier, I've been really enjoying the running. I actually impressed myself on Wednesday last week. I did I'm going to say a 7-minute 27 or a 7-minute 30-minute mile average for this 3-mile run. It took me 24 minutes. So yeah, I was so impressed. I actually called Sam. I was like, hey, do you want to go for a run? He's back in Tampa. I'm in Fort Lauderdale. He's like, yeah. And I'm like, all right, let's do it. So we counted ourselves down. He went running, I went running, and then we kind of checked back in with one another when we finished. Like, okay, what was your time? What was your distance? Or well, what was your time for the 3 miles? And yeah, I was like, oh, I blitzed you. So I actually bet him by quite a bit. But to be fair, I'd said, let's just do like an 8-minute 30 mile. And I guess I wasn't really paying a whole lot of attention. I was just running and enjoying the beautiful scenery. And I guess it just slipped my mind. I was going pretty fast. So I was very happy with that. I used that as my trial for our upcoming Love Yourself Fit Challenge. So all of our competitors or participants are doing some fitness assessments, some strength assessments. And one of the assessments was your choice of cardio over either a 1 or a 3 mile. So I did 3, and I can't wait to see what I can get that down to if I keep up running. So that was fun. So 670, actually it would be closer to 900 because I didn't record my caloric expenditure for that run. I know I've got that data, but I forgot to enter it in here. But I'd say it's close to 300. So I'm closer to 970 calories for my cardio for this week. And then with a few less walks because of the travel and just being busy, my average steps came in at 9,500 and my weekly energy expenditure totals came in around 3,200. So it's a big drop off from what I've previously been, but that's kind of the reality. I'm not competing right now. I definitely have had the itch to get back and do another show, but I think I just need to let the dust settle a little bit and then make a decision when I'm not kind of in that, post blues show phase, which is a real thing. I mean, a lot of people really struggle after a show, but I think I've had so much stuff going on, I haven't thought about it, but I'm not rushing back in to make a decision just yet, but I am thinking about maybe another show towards the end of the year. I guess with that being said, my goal for this week, I'll probably keep my target around a similar number, just knowing that my energy expenditure through activity is probably going to be quite a bit lower now. There's the pressures off to not compete. And unfortunately, because I will be a more sedentary person, I don't have the same luxury to eat as many calories. So I think, again, this number will probably keep me around 137 to 139, pounds, give or take. And again, I'm not trying to be dogmatic or zealotry when it comes to my numbers. I want to make sure that I, prioritize protein, and especially on the weekdays when I'm home and I have a little bit more control over, the choices that I have. And then I'll give myself a bit more flexibility on the weekend. So you can see here, I've got 2 scheduled high days, and they might be in the ballpark. They might be a bit higher. Other days might be a bit lower. I'll really just kind of be more thinking about eating according to my own intuition, which we can do. I've spent the last 6 months prepping using a phone, and I have to remind myself, I'm not a robot. Like, I can do this myself. I'm very I'm very grateful for the opportunity to have spent 10 years plus, maybe more than that actually, tracking macros and really familiarizing myself with what's in all kinds of foods. So I feel very comfortable now, around like most things. And because I cook and develop recipes, like I'm always in the kitchen exploring new things. So, most things when I'm eating out, I'm like, oh yeah, I've made this, or I've got a pretty good idea about what's included. So I can do some mental math and just make a general assessment. Like, is this micronutrient rich? Is it micronutrient poor? Is it high protein, high carb, high fat? Like which combination of, those is this particular meal? Yeah, I think it's an interesting position to be in. I know after kind of dieting, so many people really want to maintain, their shreds. And I think for me at least, because I'm getting so lean for a competition, I have to keep reminding myself that is a stage lean physique. It's not a normal, healthy, walking around everyday body. It's a stage lean physique. So, I know that it's something that I can do, but I also need to be mindful of when I kind of put the accelerator, push that gas pedal, and when to kind of back it off. I always say, like, it's a great tool to be able to pull out from the toolbox if I want to kind of put that amount of discipline and, pressure on. But, for the day-to-day person and the lifestyle that I live, which is pretty busy, and I've got a lot of interests and things that I enjoy doing outside of lifting, I just don't think that some of the symptoms of dieting are really necessary. I don't want to stay at that level of leanness all year round because of the known symptoms. So just to give you an example, I'm looking forwards to having a bit more body fat because it improves my mood. Symptoms of depression are pretty common for people that are experiencing like extremely low body fat percentages, not to mention, irritability and just mood fluctuation in general. So I'm looking forwards to not having as much of that, because towards the end of my prep, I could definitely just feel myself like, what is life? And it's not a direct cause and effect. It's more like the subjective experience of dieting and the negative implications it has on like your social connections and your food flexibility. Like, those are the things that kind of get you a little bit down. I'm looking forwards to having more body fat because I know it will improve my overall energy levels. When you diet and get that lean, I'm walking around pretty much dragging my feet, in all instances. Even just hopping in the car to run and grab something from the grocery store, I'm like, I'll starve. Like, your energy level is so low. Everything is a task. And so with that said, I'm also excited about having more body fat because I know I'll be able to perform a little bit better. I'll enjoy my training better. I'll be more motivated to stay healthy and be consistent with a workout regimen because I've actually got energy. So excited to see my performance and strength come back. I know in some of my movements, for instance, like my shoulder press, I have 4 years when I'm not competing, easily pressing for sets of 10 to 12, 35 to 40 pound dumbbells. Towards the last month or so of my prep, I was picking the 25s for sets of 12 and they were feeling difficult. So like a pretty notable drop off in strength for some of those muscle groups. Looking forwards to having more body fat because it'll help improve my sleep. As we get really lean, there are some unfortunate disruptions to your ability to fall asleep and then stay asleep. I'm also looking forwards to having more food flexibility. Now, as somebody that has flexible dieted for many, 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 many years, I've never been somebody to rule out any food. Nothing is off limits when I prep. You've seen me have plenty of wine, I eat out, I enjoy all of the finer things of life, but the quantities are going to be limited. So having had a ceiling on all of my food choices for the last 6 months, I'm very excited to have that ceiling lifted a bit just to afford me a bit more enjoyment of my foods. It's not not really a place that I want to stay as somebody that likes a very wide variety of food and cuisine. I think also, just from a health perspective, being really lean also has negative implications to your hormones, your sex hormones especially. So your estrogen, your testosterone, namely, then thinking about some of the hormones of the thyroid, a lot of these become or are down-regulated, and that has a number of negative effects. Causes loss of libido for a lot of people. We talk to any professional bodybuilder and they will probably tell you when they start to get a certain point in leanness, they're a lot more interested in the pizza box that might be being walked across the room and not their naked spouse. So that's kind of the reality of being stage lean. And then also I think, the social connectedness, a lot of people become homebodies when they're dieting. They, decline invitations to go and do things because they're either tired, they can't be bothered, or they've got to prep their meals, or I can't eat those meals. I don't want to, I don't have the skill to be able to navigate that on my own. I don't feel confident. So I think there are a number of implications that people tend to forget about that can, again, contribute to feelings of depression and just lower or worsen your quality of life. And then I think lastly, I guess I'll tie these two together, I'll have more time. I'm going to be taking away like hours of exercise and then all the time that goes into tracking the macros to be compliant to my targets to get to that goal. So, those things combined will give me more time to pursue other things that are just as important to me, if not more important. So, and especially my relationships. So yeah, I'm as hard as it is to transition away from that, I have to keep reminding myself of what are your values? What's more important? And I know when I was much younger, very insecure, low confidence, poor body image, feeling like I always needed to be stage lean to be taken seriously. That was a major consideration for me trying to be lean all the time. And now I just have a completely different mindset. Like, okay, that's not my identity. I need to move past this. I still have all of these great qualities, and just because I have more body fat doesn't make me a lesser person. I'm still the same person. It's just that we tend to get triggered by a body fat percentage that's a little bit higher. And again, that's a socially, culturally driven value that actually shouldn't really exist. So it's up to us to shift that narrative and kind of tell or paint a different story. Let's pop over to have a look at the YouTube questions. I know this is the second time for me answering these questions, but we'll start from the top. So this is the questions from last week's check-in, the 4th of July recap. So somebody had asked about dietary fiber, and they've said, what are some easy ways to make sure that you are getting decent fiber intake? What are your top high fiber foods? Thank you, Holly, and I'm loving this series. So there are so many fiber sources. I feel like if I listed a comprehensive list, we would be here for a few minutes, that's for sure. So I'll be quick. Generally speaking, fresh fruits and vegetables, are a top contender for me. I like those because they are micronutrient rich. My favorites, if I was going to have a fruit, and I'm honestly not a big fruit person, but I use lots of berries. So I have blackberries, blueberries, strawberries. That's kind of the fruit that I go to. And I think for a single serving, like 100 grams, you're probably looking at about 5 to 7 grams of dietary fiber. I put something up today on my Instagram. You guys can go and take a look at this. It's a really delicious protein oats, which has blueberries, pecans, brown sugar, and then a cinnamon toast crunch spread. You guys might have been familiar with this. It's such a cool product. You can use it for diversely on so many things, but it's got this spread over the top, and I use egg whites, fat-free Greek yogurt inside the oats to make it a high protein dish. So yeah, I used about 75 grams of berries just to make it look pretty, and it's also extremely high in fiber. In terms of veggies, there are lots of veggies that have very high fiber content. I think for me, my go-tos, and I'm not necessarily saying these are the highest, but I have a combination of broccoli, zucchini, yellow squash, tomatoes, all colors of bell peppers, sweet corn, jalapenos, shishito peppers, radish, lettuce. I use those in a lot of like my poke bowls. I'll have usually always 2 different types of herbs. So I'll have cilantro and basil in my refrigerator. I'm sure I'm missing some shredded cabbage, like the Napa cabbage. Again, they go really nicely in different stir fries, and to have them fresh in like a crunchy Asian salad. So yeah, they're the ones that I kind of just have, as staples all the time. So that'll get you a good amount of fiber. And I think learning to make stir fries and make those veggies taste good with a sauce. I'm less of a fan of vegetables. And to be honest, I hated veggies when I was young, like up until like age 24. You couldn't pay me enough to like make myself veggies, but it's also because I'd spent no time trying to like them. It wasn't until I started bodybuilding, where I had to get pretty creative if I wanted to do well in this sport, that I actually adopted, some new behaviors of how can I make these taste good? And now I have thousands of recipes that I actually really look forward to, and I can include them in recipes that are not traditionally high in vegetables. Like if you think about like the Mexican cuisine, not normally a super vegetable rich, cuisine, but they offer me an opportunity to add in lots of veggies. Similar with Asian-based dishes, all kinds of things. So fruit and veggies, grains, particularly whole wheat grains, bran, oatmeal. I have popcorn. I get the little skinny 100-calorie bags. It's like a cheddar. I've got a cheddar seasoning on them. Fully acknowledging there's garlic or onion powder. I can't remember which one on that particular product. So if you've got IBS, be aware. But, when I was dieting, and looking for something that was high fiber and lower in calories, I would have that. But also great just for a quick snack if you're, waiting to go and have another meal and you need something to hold you over. So whole wheat based products, bran, oatmeal. I use a lot of the high fiber wraps, and I'll use like the little mini ones or the big ones to make pizzas, to make desserts with like a nice like spread, like a Biscoff spread. You can get really creative with these. I use the lavish breads to make lasagna, like they become the layers of my lasagna. I use them to make, what else have I used? There's so many things. Did I say pizza already? Tacos. They're very versatile. So that's kind of what I use. And most of these products have like 15 grams of fiber per serve. Lentils, nuts, and seeds are another, group of foods that offer high fiber. So I was just talking about broad beans earlier in one of my dishes. Black beans. Now, I acknowledge that lentils and chicory in general are high FODMAPs because of the fructans and various other FODMAPs, but in a really small amount, I will sometimes do those as a last resort because they're very fibrous. But if you do not have IBS, legumes, nuts, and seeds are an excellent source. And you don't have to have like a whole, vegetarian dish out of them. It might just be to like top a nice salad. So you might sprinkle over 30 grams of black beans to your nachos, or you might sprinkle over, some lentils or something on top of a salad dish. And then speaking of nuts and seeds, I have sunflower seeds here at home, chia seeds, flax seeds, almonds, all kinds of different nuts. And again, I usually kind of, rub them up and like crush them into like little pieces, and they become like a salad topper. Or if I make like mac and cheese, I'll put, crushed pecans or something on top for something that's a little crunchy. So those are some other ways to increase your dietary fiber consumption. So I hope that helps. Okay, so the next question is, could you elaborate on the main differences between training for maintenance versus training for potential growth, specifically for beginner lifters eating in a small calorie deficit? How should volume, proximity to failure, rep ranges, and progressive overload be approached in each case? Okay, so first and foremost, it sounds like you are currently intentionally eating in a small calorie deficit, and you're also wanting to potentially consider the differences between being at maintenance, so not really achieving any additional growth, but just maintaining what you've got, versus training for potential growth. So I think we'll start off with staying at maintenance and how that might impact your training volume, proximity to failure, rep ranges, progressive overload. So I would say that your program design doesn't necessarily need to change. So your exercise selection doesn't need to change. Your rep ranges probably don't need to change. Your training volume has the potential to come down a little bit if you're not shooting for growth. And I'd still program, the recommended progressive overload just for the sake of programming with an evidence-based approach. Though your need to train at high training intensities is probably not going to be as nearly as important if you're not looking to really maximize any growth adaptations. So just as an example, the differences between my programming when I'm shooting for a muscle building phase versus me just kind of being happy where I'm at, my training volume, like the weekly set number on the muscle groups that I care about, probably is going to look quite a bit different. So what I would recommend, and I want to keep this specific to you, so you're talking about being a beginner, for muscle growth. So if you were looking to actually see meaningful changes in your body comp as a beginner, you can probably start to see that with a weekly set number per muscle group, somewhere in the realm of maybe 10 to 15 sets. So let's say you're wanting to grow all of your muscle groups. You'd be doing 10 to 15 sets of every muscle group every week to elicit some growth adaptations. Now, if you weren't necessarily interested in changing your body composition and you're like, you know what, I've found that I really enjoy lifting, so I might like to just stay here at maintenance. I don't have any desires to become the next, bodybuilder or professional physique athlete, but I do like, lifting in general. It's good for my health. Then you could probably get away with doing slightly less, sets per week. So maybe somewhere in the realm of, I'm going to say 5 to 10 working sets. That would probably burn calories, but not necessarily be enough to elicit a hypertrophy response. Whereas for somebody that's more advanced, those numbers tend to look a bit different. So for you, as maybe the beginner lifter now, eventually you're going to progress. And you'd probably like to see those weekly set numbers increase as your body adapts. So you're going to need more of a stimulus to maintain that muscle mass that you have accrued over time. And you're going to need slightly even more again to elicit more growth adaptations. So for me, as somebody that's been lifting for close to 2 decades, not all of that has been with an evidence-based approach, I can assure you, maybe the last 10 to 12 years have. But I probably need to, in efforts to grow, stay within like the 20 to 30 sets per muscle group per week to elicit some positive growth adaptations. So right now for me, I've only got 2 muscle groups that I care about. So my glutes and shoulders, I'm programming close to 30 sets a week for those muscle groups. And with my limited time, what that means is the other muscle groups actually fall back quite a bit. So, the less important muscle groups for me, I might be just hitting around 15 sets. So for maintenance for an experienced lifter, an advanced lifter, somebody that's been training for some time, you would probably be able to maintain your current level of muscle mass somewhere between 10 and 20. And I know I'm painting with broad strokes here, but that's probably the reality. There's probably quite a bit of diversity between individuals on what someone can maintain on. So for me, I've taken a lot of those muscle groups back down to like 10, the bottom reference range there. So 10 working sets per week, and I have maintained those muscle groups successfully. So there is a bit of a difference there in terms of the weekly set volume. In terms of proximity to failure, if you're trying to maintain your muscle group, you would still want to train, within like an RPE 7 through to 10. I don't often train to 10, like a true failure. It's just harder on your body, harder on your mind too, when I'm just there to try and, be healthy. So proximity to failure would still need to be high in efforts to elicit the response that you're looking for, whether that is just maintenance or for growth. In terms of the rep ranges, that really depends on your goals. So if you're somebody that is interested in improving your strength, then the research would indicate that specifically programming strength rep ranges, which is 1 through to about 6, is going to be optimal. Whereas if you're more concerned with hypertrophy, so growth adaptations, in your case, maintaining or growing muscle, then you'd want to stay, somewhere around like 8 and above. And there's a very wide range of repetition ranges that you can stick with and that are still going to elicit similar response in terms of muscle growth. That's rep ranges. And then in terms of progressive overload, that would be something that you would be applying if you are wanting to see improvements, whether that is strength being the main primary goal or growth, muscle growth. When I am not focused on building muscle, if I'm just sitting at maintenance, I still want to train close to failure, but I might not push myself, through to an RPE 10 if I'm not really looking to make major changes. And often it's just more mentally and psychologically taxing to be pushing, 9s and 10s all the time. I actually want to enjoy my training too. And when we know that we can get similar adaptation through training at a slightly lower RPE of like 7 or 8, then I will opt for that. But if I was looking to see improvements in my strength, or if I'm looking to chase, maximum gains, I would definitely be implementing some progressive overload. And then the last consideration here that you'd mentioned was the nutritional implications. You're talking about doing this from being in a small calorie deficit. So we know that that's not necessarily the most ideal place, nutritionally speaking, to be in if you're looking to grow. But I would also give some consideration to somebody's current body composition. How much body fat do they have versus not, because that would too have implications as to energy availability. We need energy to help with growing muscles. So if you've got a nice reservoir of body fat in the form of adipose tissue, that can potentially be used to help build muscle. But if you're a very lean individual, then you're going to have a more challenging time with muscle growth if there is nothing to grow from. It's like trying to grow, a plant without having any nutrients available or soil to grow the plant. Similarly said, if you're trying to build a house, if you don't have building materials to, create and construct the building, it's very difficult to build that house. Similarly said with growing muscle. I think that your unique individual circumstances will definitely play a role here. Again, I don't know the context or enough about your anthropometrics to be able to give you, hey, you should do this. But generally speaking, when you're in a small deficit, you're not going to get as good of a result in terms of growth adaptations outside of the context of what I've described. And there are also some people that are obese or brand new to resistance training, because again, there are so many considerations where even being in a deficit, somebody that is new to lifting can still get very good growth adaptations because it's a brand new training stimulus. We call those newbie gains. So again, the context and the circumstances for an individual is going to really determine kind of how well you're going to grow muscle and how well you might be able to maintain it. So thank you for that question. And I think that's about all from last week's check-in. But if you guys have questions, as I always say, please feel free to drop those in the comment section. And I want to take a minute to just talk about some of the things that we've got going on here at Team Be a Body and with Be a Fit. So we'll start with Be a Body. If you are somebody that is interested in one-on-one coaching, then look no further than my coaching team. Not only is there me to work with, but I also have an incredible team of ladies that would love the opportunity to work with you. We have Miss Shay, we have Caitlin, we have Shannon, and we have Gabrielle. Each of the ladies have their own specific areas of interest, and they span from menopause, perimenopause, hormonal health, through to physiology and anatomy and physical therapy. We have intuitive eating, mindful eating approaches, non-tracking approaches to nutrition, and basically everything in between. So if you were looking for some additional support with your goals, please by all means reach out. All of the details are described in the description below. We've just launched Be a Brain, which is our new research review. So every month we will be publishing an article or a magazine that covers 4 different topics related to our field. So health, exercise, and nutrition in general. So we usually do 2 in the area of resistance training or exercise, and then 2 over in the area of nutrition. And we do a complete summary and a breakdown of research articles or a topic in general. And we also have that with an accompanying audio guide. So if you are somebody that's super busy and hasn't really had much success with research reviews in the past because they're always provided in a written format, then now we have an audible version for you. So that has been wildly successful in the first few days. I am so grateful and appreciative of everybody that's already jumped on and signed up for a full year. I know we are very excited to continue to deliver you the latest research in this field. So go and take a look at the different subscriptions. What else have we got going on? Be a Fit, my training app, is something else that you guys might be interested in. I know we always get a lot of questions about resistance training. It's great to have this knowledge and understanding, and I hope that what I'm sharing with you is proving to be beneficial for your learning. But there's also just time, and sometimes even though we might know how to create a program and write a really great workout, it is time that is limiting us. So Be a Fit is a platform. It's available on Android and iOS. It caters to a really wide variety of different programs. So we have cardio-based workouts, we have hypertrophy-specific programs, we have strength-specific programs, and then we have hybrid programs and mobility stretching. So if you're somebody that needs a little bit of extra support with how to get warmed up correctly for the upper body and the lower body, one of our coaches, Dr. Shannon Russell, has so very generously offered her expertise with some interesting exercises that we've got demonstrations for all of these too. So go and check out Be a Fit. We are very excited about that platform. What else? Books, educational materials, and free resources. So over on my website, We have so many different products. I have training accessories like my glute bands, but accessories, jumpers, t-shirts, all the good fun stuff that's Be Your Body branded. So if you're looking to support me in any way, that would be where you can go and find some of our products. I also have my recent publication, The Complete Exercise Guide to Muscle Hypertrophy. That book has gone off like hotcakes. The people that are reviewing this particular book have said that it has been so informative, perhaps better than even some of the courses that they have done online, which is music to my ears. I'm so glad that people are finding that book super interesting, very thorough, and enjoyable. So go and check out those books. We've got our recipe guides and then our free resources page. So you can get free workouts. They are downloadable usually in an Excel format. They're not obviously the same as our app, but free nonetheless. We have other free educational materials. We have, recipes. So you name it, it's on the website. So go and check those out. We want to make sure that we've got lots of things to support you guys in your journey as well. So that is all from me. I hope you guys have a great week, and I look forward to checking in with you next week. And I have no idea what I'm going to get up to this weekend, but I'm excited to share whatever that is with you. See you next time.